Hello, everyone. This is Alexander Lucard, and I am an HMIS system administrator here for the Montgomery County Continuum of Care. In this training, we're going to be looking at how to properly set up a household and then enter them into your program. The first thing we're going to do is go over to Client Point. And Client Point is where we have our client search function where we can look up a client. Today, we're going to look at the Jetsons, and we're going to build them as a family here in Service Point. So we can look up a few letters. We could just do a couple letters like that, Jet, or we can put the whole name in, Jetson, and let's see what happens. We click search and return, and we can see that, look, there's 4 family members. There's an Elroy Jetson, a George Jetson, a Jane Jetson, and a Judy Jetson. Now, if there is a person that should be in the family that doesn't show up in the search, it could be because they have a different last name. Maybe the last name's hyphenated. Maybe it's misspelled in the system, or maybe they haven't been entered yet into HMIS. So you're going to want to do another search if you think that someone is in HMIS but not showing up in the client results, or you're going to have to make a new client after doing an exhaustive search to make sure they aren't already in the system. We're going to cover how to create someone in a different training. But for this training, we're just going to assume that everyone is already here in HMIS and is good to go. In this case, we can see George, Jane, Judy, and Elroy. They're all here. Got their social security numbers and date of birth. That's great. We've got their genders. That's great too. And their household count, though, is 0. What this means is that they are not connected to any households in HMIS, which means they aren't in a household. They're all set up as just single people. We click on the magnifying glass. We can see Elroy Jetson is not currently a member of a household. Judy Jetson is not currently a member of a household. And that's not something we want to see, because if you're a family program and you try to enter them into your program, they're going to be entered as 4 single individuals, not 1 household unit. And what we're going to do today is show you how to create that household unit so that you can properly enter a family into your program. Again, we're going to take all 4 of these people and we're going to enter them as a family unit. And again, a family doesn't necessarily have to be related. You could have 3 single individuals living together. You could have third cousins living together. A family does not have to be a parent and a child. It can be any sort of group of people that are living together in a unit served by your program that identify as a household. So let's come here and let's create our family. We're going to choose George because we know George is the head of the household, and we always want to start the household unit with the head of the household. We can click on the pencil or his name. Either one, it's going to take us to the same spot. We can see this, the backdate mode. We don't have to worry about backdating for creating a household. So we can click that off. And we're going to go over to either the Households tab and click Start New Household, or we can do the Summary tab and Start New Household. Either one, Summary or Household, it's going to take us to the same spot, and we just want to click the Start New Household button. Just so you don't have other stuff on your screen, I'm going to do it on the Household tab so we can look specifically just as that. We can click Search New Household or Start New Household because we can see, again, this client is currently not a member of any household. Was he ever in another household? No, he was not. Under previous households, he's never been in a family, which means someone has entered all the Jetsons into Service Point, into our HMIS system, but they haven't connected them as a family, and that's what we're going to do today. So we just click Start New Household. And look, this is the client search screen. It looks a little different, though. We can see we have a selected client, and we can see that we have a household type. These are new. These don't show up on the Client Point screen. These 2 sections only show up when you do a Start New Household. And we can see here George is already under the selected clients because this is the account we were working under. We move this a little bit. We can see we're in George's account and we're starting a new household under George, which is why he automatically is a default client under the selected. You can't remove him. You can't change him. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in his account if he wasn't going to be part of this household, right? So first, let's choose the household type. What type of a family are we setting up? Couple with no children, female single parent, foster parent, grandparent and child, male single parent, non-custodial caregiver, other, two-parent family. So an other would be, again, like, let's say it's 4 or 5 people living together. They aren't genetically related, but they're all together, and they identify as a household. That's when you could use other. In this case, because we know it's 2 parents and 2 children, we are going to choose the 2-parent family. It's important that we do pick our household type, so let's make sure we get it. The system suggests, hey, doing a search for everyone with the last name Jetson. But again, if it's hyphenated or the children have different names than one of the parents or something like that, maybe they're stepchildren, you're going to want to do a second or even a territory search in order to make sure that you get all members of the family in here. We're going to go with the prompt of Jetson, and we're going to click search. This brings up the other 3 members we're going to add today, Elroy, Jane, and Judy. To add them into the family and move them down to selected clients, we just click on the green plus button. See how I'm doing that? And now they're here under selected clients. If you make a mistake, look, let's say we don't want to have Elroy in there, we click the minus sign, and he goes back up to the client results, but we do want him in there. So again, the minus sign moves them out of the family, and the green plus sign moves them into the family. Once you have your entire family here set up and you've got all the members you want in the household, we click continue. And this takes us to the household information screen. And now we have a little more setup to do. We can see that we've got client records for each of the clients. We can see a head of the household, everyone's listed as no, and the relationship to head of the household is blank. So we're going to fix that now. Only one person should be the head of the household. You can only have one head of the household. So we're going to say yes to George. So even if George and Judy, consider themselves equal partners 100%, only one can be listed the head of the household in HMIS. So you just have to decide, maybe the family will say, oh, well, list me as the head of the household, and you do that, or you pick one. So in this case, we're just doing George. He's the first in the song, so we're going to do him. And you can see that when we change it to yes, his relationship to head of the household automatically changed to self. That's good. That's one less thing you have to do. Now you just have to set up the relationship with the head of the household for the other family members. So Elroy, we click on him and we can see here's this big long list of options. His boy Elroy, son. Daughter Judy, daughter. And Jane is his wife. Of course, if they aren't married or they have some other sort of relationship other than wife and husband, you could do significant other. It's also important that even though Jane is the mother of the children, don't set her up as the mother here, because this is relationship to the head of the household. Jane may be the mother of Judy and Elroy, but if you set her up as the mother, you were saying she is George's mother, and that makes a whole awkward situation. So make sure that you do for the spouse, significant other, or wife, depending on status. And the same for if Judy or if Jane is the head of the household, then George would be husband or significant other. Just depends on who you set up as the head of the household. All right. And we can see that we've got that all set up. Pretty easy, right? That's all we have to do. And once we have the head of the household and the relationship with the head of the household set up, we hit save and exit. And now we can see on the households tab, we can see the whole family is set up. There's their aide. We can see who's the head of the household. We can see the relationship of the head of the household, when they join the household, and the household count. Again, the household count has now changed from 0 to 1. And if we click on the magnifying glass, there we go. The current household of George Jetson. Now, joined household. Let's have a little conversation about this. Joined household, the date is when they come to the county together as a household. So if Jane and George got married 23 years ago, the joint household date is not going to be 1998. It's going to be the day that they came to the COC, for help, funding, rental assistance, whatever it is. And we're going to make sure that the whole family comes in at that date. Now, we're going to do a separate supplemental training down the road for if people come into the family or leave, like a baby. And that's the only time when the joint household date is going to be slightly different. But for most of the family, they're all going to have the same joint household date together because that's the date that they as a group applied for whatever they applied for here in the Montgomery County COC. Again, we'll do a separate training, a follow-up one after this. It'll be a separate recording, separate PowerPoint to show you what to do when you have a baby enter the program, if someone dies in the family and you need to exit them out of the household. But we're not quite done yet with this family. We've got the household done. We can see that there they are. They're all set up in the summary. If we click on Elroy, it takes us to Elroy's account. If we go to Jane, it takes us to Jane's account. Back to George. We still have two other small things we need to do before we consider the family done for your program. And both of them are under the entry-exit screen. Because of course, we've set up the family. And now what we need to do is enter the family into our program. Because we want to get credit for them being in the program. If we don't do the entry, they're not going to count as actually being in your program. And remember, we just click on the add entry date. And then we have all these different things here. First, we're going to set up our provider. I'm just going to take Rapid Rehousing HSP Families because I know it's a family program. This is our provider. Type for that type of program is HUD. Depending on your program type, and always double check, especially if you're new, what your program type is. Most of our programs are HUD, but there are PATH programs and other programs like that, which is why we have the whole drop-down menu. In this case, I know Catholic Charities HSP Rapid Rehousing is a HUD program, so I'm choosing that. And then the start date. Remember, there is a difference between the start date and the move-in date. The start date is the date that they accept being into our program. And then later on, there is a move-in date. We'll cover the move-in date and again, another supplemental training. Remember that there is a difference between the start date and the move-in date. The start date is the date that they agree to be into the program. The move-in date is the date that they actually move in / lease up into your program. Now, we've done all of this, but if we hit save and exit or save and continue, we've actually made a mistake here. See up here where we have the whole household member? There's only a check by George's name. If we hit save and continue and move on, we get this. Warning, the client has household members, yet none have been associated with this entry exit. Are you sure you want to proceed? If you say yes, only George is going to be checked into your program. Elroy, Jane, and Judy will not be in your program. George will be in there as a single individual. You don't want that. If you are a family program, you want to enter the family as a family, not as 4 single individuals. And how do you do that? You do that by making sure there is a check by each member of the family's name. You can do that by either manually checking each person, or you can go up to the family household descriptor, 2-parent family, household ID number 5, click on the box there, and it automatically puts a check in everyone. So now everyone's highlighted. That's great. Because we are entering all 4 of them together as a family, we want to check mark by them. If there's another person in there, like say Spacely Sprockets is in there, that's probably an accident. He's not supposed to be a member of the family. So don't have a check by their name. And then go back to the household and try and figure out why he was added to the household. Again, let's say Jane has died and you don't want Jane in your family. You make sure that she doesn't have a check by her box. Only the people who are actually in the family need a check by their name. This is super, super important. If a person has left the family like 5 years ago, you don't want to be checking your program and have him listed as a member of the family. Only people that are actually in the family should have a check by their name. If you see anyone that isn't here or that is on the list that shouldn't be, you need to cancel out, go back to the household, and fix the household. If everything looks right, we can proceed. Let's remake that. HUD, and we're going to say today's date, 4/8/2021, is the start date, which is the date that they said, yes, I'm going to be in your program. Thank you for asking. We hit save and continue. And there's one last step we do to properly set up a household. Now we're here on the entry tab. And like every good provider, I know that you're going to go in and answer all of these questions. Every single one of these questions should have an answer, especially those HUD verifications. That is so important, especially when you're doing your Supernova ranking. But For the purposes of setting up a household correctly, you absolutely need to make sure the first question you do as a family provider is relationship to head of household. This is similar to the one we did in the household tab. Remember, we said George was the head of the household, Jane was the wife, Judy's the daughter, Elroy's the son. We have to make sure that this is set up. And if this is not set up, then your reports are not going to run correctly. Your APR, which is the be all and end all of what we're doing here with HMIS, will not run correctly. So we need to make sure that we get this in. There we go for George. And of course, you're then going to follow down and you're going to finish answering the questions. Does he have a disabling condition? Where is he located? What was his prior living condition? What's his income from any source? You're going to answer all of those questions. You're going to make sure that every question has an answer and that those that are already answered before you are correct. Like you're going to look at the date, you're going to look at the race, whatever's got an answer already in it, and you're going to make sure that it's correct. And then you're going to move on to all the other family members. But you can't move on to a family member until you've answered all these questions, right? So you have to answer all these questions, save, then move on to Elroy, fix all of his questions, move on to Jane, fix all of his questions, move on to Judy and fix all of his questions for her questions. And that's what we would do here. And once you've done everything correctly, you'll have a nice little entry here into your program. And it doesn't matter which family member you go into, Elroy's going to have an entry. Judy's going to have that entry. And if we click on the entry, see they're all together as a family. And remember that you're going to want to make sure that those boxes are all checked whenever you do an interim. So if you do an interim for the family, they're all going to need a check mark. Add interim review. Are you doing your annual assessment because they've been in the program for a year or 2 years or 3 years? Make sure they all have a check mark. Are you exiting the family? Make sure they all have a check mark. In this case, look at this. Only Judy has a check mark. If we fill out the exit data, only Judy's going to be checked out and the rest of the family is going to be left in there. There have been times where I've seen where like a child has been left without a check mark. And so all of a sudden you have an unaccompanied minor in your program. You don't want that. That's going to be a red flag. Make sure that you check out everyone together. And the only exception that is, say, maybe the parents get a divorce and one leaves the household. But again, we're going to cover people leaving or entering a household in a supplemental follow-up training. Today's training was just to show you how to set up a household correctly and how to enter them into HMIS correctly. Again, after this, if you want to view the supplemental training, which is going to show you how to change a household, say someone comes into the family or someone leaves, please move on to that training. I hope you enjoyed this one and have a great day.